Greetings, everyone, from the Blessed Michael McGivney Pilgrimage Center in New Haven, Connecticut. Thank you so much for being part of our presentation today. My name is Peter Sonsky from the McGivney Center. And before I introduce our guests and our topic, just allow me to go over a few housekeeping details with regard to our program. And I apologize for a little bit of technical delay in getting started. There is a utility in the margin that you can use if you'd like to offer questions. You just type in a question and I'll monitor those throughout the course of today's session. The session should last about 45 minutes. And there is also a utility there for you to download a handout. The handout is in a PDF format. It contains links to our guest's website, to his social media channels, and so you can learn more about him in particular. Also on there is more information about the show, which is here at the McGivney Center. Today is May 10th of 2023, and the presentation is being recorded for the benefit of those who are unable to join us live, but it will be available for on-demand viewing via the McGivney Center's YouTube channel later today. So my guest today, as you can see from your title screen, is Mr. Tony A. Tiger. He is an artist whose work is featured in the McGivney Center's current exhibition, Altars of Reconciliation. And the show is on view here through August 13th of 2023. Tony is a Christian. He is a Native American. And the exhibit, which he curated in collaboration with two other Native American artists, whose work is also on display in the show, it centers on their embrace of Christianity as Indigenous American people. And I realize that some may see a potential dichotomy in that these artists are accepting the faith of those who introduced it from Europe as settlers and colonists. But that's the theme that the show seeks to address, and we will dive into that now with Tony. Tony, you're very kind to join us. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
We're thrilled to have your show here. And, you know, before we get into the actual pieces of art that we're going to show on our slide deck, maybe you could just give us a little insight to your tribal ancestry, your upbringing.
So I'm an enrolled member of the Sac Fox tribe of Oklahoma, and I also have Seminole and Muscogee Creek ancestry. And so I was born in LA to Bill and Wanda Tiger, who were from Oklahoma, and so they moved to LA, in the early '60s, because there wasn't a whole lot going on in Oklahoma for Indigenous people, even though there were 39 tribes here. So the economy was bad, and so there was a program during the Eisenhower administration for tribal members to move away from their tribal centers and into larger cities. And so my parents chose to move to LA. And so my parents, were wonderful people, and they were believers, followers of Christ, and my dad was a Baptist minister. And so they had a large impact on my life, my life, and mainly about their faith. And as a young person, you're a child and you listen to your parents and their direction, and you listen. But as you grow up, you have your own ideas about life and the meaning of it. And so although I did believe in the things of the Bible, maybe I just didn't know Christ as well as he expects me to. And so that was really kind of the beginning of the journey that I began to take as an adult, and to know Christ better. And really that's kind of where the ideas for the exhibition came about, as it's been a really blessing to be able to have the opportunity to follow Christ. And it transcends into everything that I do and am. And I really enjoy the opportunity to share my art with you all there in New Haven, Connecticut.
Well, you're very grateful to do so. And, this is an institution that really likes to focus on Christian heritage. And to be sure, this is a very unique presentation, and one that we're enjoying making available to the public here. I want to read something from your artist's statement, your introduction, if you will, your self-written introduction to the items that are on display, uh, your works that are on display. You said that you have, quote, reason to hate those whose policies and actions removed my ancestors from tribal homelands and wiped out whole tribes for their benefit, unquote. But then you go on to say that your faith has helped you to overcome that sentiment. Can you offer more insight as to how that's come about and maybe how your art has helped in that journey of healing?
Yeah, so history, history of America is not always red, white, and blue. If you go back and you're serious about the history of America, and you go back and look at it, and I don't think that in our public schools we teach it very well. But I think a lot of people, just in talking to people today, they believe that some of the American Indians just left their ancestral homelands, and they all ended up in Oklahoma, and or else some don't even realize that there's still indigenous people alive today. So that's really about the what's taught in our history books in our schools. But so for myself, I do know the history, and I do take opportunity to learn more and to research different collections of objects and the history of where my people came from, and so when you do that, there can be a place of resentment, a place of you could even say hate, and I think every individual deals with these kinds of thoughts. But for myself, because I am a follower of Christ, the Scripture tells us, we have to forgive. And actually, just read that earlier this morning. Forgiveness is so important with the Almighty because He deals with every individual, and that's so important because He's forgiven us, each individual, as you would put faith in Him. So He's forgiven us so that we can have an opportunity to know Him and to have a relationship with Him, and in turn, spend eternity with Him. So for me, as I read the Scriptures, and I try to do it on a daily basis, so many believe that the Scriptures are just words, but they're more than words. The book of Hebrews says that the Word is living and sharp and piercing, and so it gets to the heart of the individual if you allow it to. And I don't think maybe a lot of believers really don't read the Bible as much as they ought. But I do find clarity and truth that helps me to understand that every human being, has an opportunity to know God, whether or not they take it and embrace it. That's also the choice that He's given every individual. And so for me, I do see this, but I see the truth of it, the truth of the Word in my daily life, and in the individuals I live around, and so I really do. And so the truth of the gospel, that there's a transformation that comes about in a person if they are willing, because you don't have to allow God to transform you, but you can, and really that's what He wants. And there was a transformation in my life, and the arts really just helped me to utilize it and to put it out in a visual format that others can also see it as well.
Well, then let's talk a little bit about that. And I admire your thoughts because you said you don't have to allow God to do that, but you can indeed resist it. But being disposed to His work in your life makes it a gentler process, shall we say? But you do work in kind of a series. You'll do works of art that are all somewhat consistent in their style and presentation. And this is an example. This is a piece in the show where there are photographs, but then you have these geometric shapes and vivid colors that are surrounding it. tell us a little bit more about this particular piece and about this series of art that's on display.
Yeah, I really enjoy utilizing historic photographs, family photographs, tribal photographs of of my people and family, because it shares a narrative that is important to storytelling. And so this piece, there's so we have the photographic etchings of my grandfather there on the upper left, and he's actually translating the New Testament into Muskogee language. And you can barely make out that there's a reel-to-reel recorder at his feet that he's doing this. And so my grandfather was born in Oklahoma just after statehood, and so he earned a high school education at Bacone College, and very he had a very classical education as a high schooler, and a very intelligent man. And so he went to Florida, and he worked there as a missionary among the Seminole people, and he was down there for a good while. And then on the upper right, you see his family there. My dad has a little boy, my aunt, my grandmother, and a great aunt. The lower images as of on the left side is of me as we lived on the Standing Rock Reservation, where my dad took a pastorate in the mid 70s, and then my parents there in the lower center. And so the images, are important because it relates the idea that these individuals are real. And so a painter can paint, and the image of the individuals in the painting may or may not be real, but when you use a photograph, you know that these individuals, did exist. And so this is my family. And then you see a lot in the works that this body and the other bodies incorporate is a triangular pattern. And so it's an interlocking triangular pattern. And so that pattern represents men and women in community. And so shoulder to shoulder, going through generations and time, and passing knowledge, culture to each generation. And then the top is our Seminole patchwork design. So you see the upper leaning blue stripes that represent rain. You see the diamonds of yellow and red there that represent the Seminole people. And then you see a 4-directional cross. And then again, you see the alternating triangular pattern that represent men and women in community. And so community has always been important to Indigenous people. And I really have enjoyed that idea of our people being together. And that was one thing that the federal government did, is that they did their best to make sure that we were scattered, not only tribally from our ancestral homes, but also from tribal centers. And so some of the government policies of sending children to boarding schools, separating people, I lived a part of it during the relocation program of the Eisenhower administration, and my parents went to LA, and that's where I was born. And so we were separated from our ancestors, or from our families and our tribal centers, and we missed out on some things. And so like language and tribal customs, food, clothing, and having that knowledge. And so that's kind of what the series is speaking about. But really the series is speaking to how God has created us. He's created us men and women, and by procreating, we can create another generation. And so that's very important to me as I look back at my family and what they taught me, and how this piece, is speaking to the viewer.
Is this you again, Tony?
This is me as a young boy. I was probably about 15, 16 years old, and we were living on the Standing Rock Reservation, and in North Dakota. And so we moved there in '76. Actually, we arrived on Halloween night, and so we came from a fairly good-sized town in Oklahoma, and our relatives were all around us, and we were in the heart of the Sac Fox Nation. And so we moved to a place that we didn't know, but my father, took a pastorate on the Standing Rock Reservation at a Lakota mission, and he felt that that's where he was supposed to be. And so we spent our 70s there and early 80s, and And so we were outsiders. We were, even though we were indigenous, we were still outsiders. But one way that we were welcomed into the community is that the four oldest children were athletes. And so I ran track, played football and basketball, and wanted to rodeo, but my parents wouldn't let me. But I did play the sports. And so this is a photograph that my father took, and my father was very proud of his children. And he took a photograph. He took photographs of us, and I have a few of these that I incorporate into my artwork. But it's really speaking about, you know, my own heart. I was young. I was a young boy, and I was missing home. I was missing my family, and so I'm a Muskogee on the rock, and so the reservation was the Standing Rock Reservation. But the thing that really I think helped me was actually the landscape and nature. And so we lived right on the Missouri River, and I could go down to the river and swim and fish, and I would hunt, and I think that really you know was a help to me as a young boy, you know, being separated from my family, because my family loved to hunt and fish as well. And but I got to do a little bit of that there. And but it was a challenge to be on the Standing Rock Reservation. But these are just memories of me thinking of home.
Tony, you've employed that interlocking theme again. I see the Seminole diamond. What else do we see among the
So you
patterns?
so you see the checkerboard. It's another Seminole patchwork design. Sometimes they use more of the checkerboard squares there. Sometimes they can represent raindrops. And then you see this blue darkened area that looks kind of like a crayfish. And so again, that's another Seminole patchwork design that I like to incorporate. So I don't practice Seminole ceremonies or ceremonies of even my Sac Fox people very much, but the things that I do that I can take in, you know, participate in, I do. But there's some things I can't, and so some of the images are used in ceremony. They represent different aspects of ceremony. But I use the patchwork designs thinking about relationships. And so going fishing with my grandfather, going fishing with my uncle, and cousins, and just thinking about those times that we spent on the riverbank or in the kayak or whatever. And so those are the things that I'm really relating to, trying to you know, to keep myself, you know, together as a human being, because it was a challenge to live there, you know, so far away from your family and tribe.
No doubt. This looks like mom and dad.
This is mom and dad. So my parents were just lovely people. You know, my dad was pretty strict, you know, as a gentleman of that time period, and he wasn't above corporal punishment. And but I at the time I didn't appreciate it, but as a man now I do appreciate it, because I know what he was trying to do. And my mother was just a lovely lady. I got to talk about her last night to a young adults group at the church I attend, and so, but just you know, just a loving lady who had a heart for Christ, and um, realized that her life was not her own. So she was a wife, she was a mother, and but most importantly, she would say that she was a follower of God who must share the gospel, and wherever that takes them. And even though at this time they didn't have a high school education between them, they did. They were great leaders, and many people talk about them fondly. But while we were on the Standing Rock Reservation, I remember both of them received their or earned their GEDs, and then my dad earned an associate's degree at the community college. And so they really were my inspiration and encouragement to think about what I would do with my life. And I knew, but the most powerful thing I think about my parents was their faith. They had great faith that whatever God said that they should do, they would do it. And they were able to do many things. And we traveled extensively as a native family. And coming back to Oklahoma after we spent some time at Standing Rock, different people looked at us in a different way because we had experienced things that they had never experienced. Many natives have never traveled out of their community. Many natives have never traveled to out of the state at that time, and so we were very privileged to experience so many things as a native family, and I really appreciate that. And then if you look closely, there's kind of a ghost image in the background of one of my ancestors. My mother's would be a great grandfather, and so just really thankful and blessed to have a photograph like that. Probably about 1870 in that area, and so I use that sometimes in the artwork, speaking about time and place and individuals and culture.
So this one has less variety of colors, but more in images.
Yes, and so this is Muskogee Narrative, and it's really speaking about the Muskogee side of my family and my heritage. So the Muskogees were a tribe, but there was also a confederacy of tribes that would take part, and so early on, before the nation, they came together and they were utilizing each other because bigger tribes or even Europeans were coming in and doing different things, and so they would come together and they would fight together and they would incorporate trade together, and so the language. So you will see that if you looked at Muskogee, the word, it will even say that it's a language, or it's a part of language, and there are many groups that belong to it. And so to belong to the Confederacy, you had to speak Muskogee, even though you may have had your own language. And so the Seminoles and the Seminoles, Muskogees, and then a few other tribes. My mind isn't thinking clearly right now, but there were other tribes that were a part of that also had to speak the Muskogee language. And it was an interesting context of what this word means. So it's really greater than just the tribe. It's also a language. And so I'm looking there at my family. I'm looking there at the individuals that helped me think about my heritage and lineage. And so my connection to the language is through the Muskogee hymn. And so my father was a minister, and when we would come home from the Dakotas, he would go down to some of the Seminole and the Muskogee churches in Oklahoma. At that time, many of them were still preaching and teaching in the Muskogee language, but they would also sing hymns, which are very powerful. And I remember going in, and they still, at that time, men sat on one side, women sat on the other, and then you'd have preachers set up at the near the podium, and they would sing these powerful hymns. It was almost like the roof was going to get blown off by how powerful these were in some of these old wooden buildings, and they still sing them today. And so I really appreciate that part of the Muskogee heritage that I have. And again, you see the triangular patterns that represent men and women in community, some more of the Seminole patchwork designs. And so I really just enjoyed this series of work. And you see this series right now, and you see it to a point, and I've taken it even further as I continue to explore. And I've taken it further to where you hardly see any of the white in some of the later work the current work I'm doing now. And so it's an evolving thing, or revolving and evolving presentation of art, and I really enjoyed this, and I'm really thankful to the other to the professors that I had to study under, and even some fellow colleagues of artists that I get to work with. They're very gracious and showing me different techniques, and so like Mr. Martin, he and I have been working together for a good while, and he had all the tools because he was a practicing professor at John Brown University, and so he'd invite me over, and we'd work together, and we would print together, and so I'm really thankful for individuals like that.
Tony, when was it that you decided to take up art as a full-time activity?
Well, I had an older brother who was really an inspiration to me young, and he was kind of a natural. His name is Boyd. He's no longer with us, but he was a natural. Paint, draw, um, and he was really the inspiration. And we were young. We were kind of close in age. He and I were next to each other in our age, in our family, and we were both athletes. We both, loved to hunt a little bit, and we'd hang out with each other and compete a great deal. I outgrew him when I was in middle school, and so he liked having me around because if he got into trouble, I could help him get out. But so we had a good close relationship. But I remember what he was doing, there in with his own artwork, and he inspired me to think about those things. But I didn't have the natural gift. And so later on, as I did kind of dabble in it in high school, and that was okay. But later on, as I went to study at college and university, I learned how to draw. I learned what it meant to create art, and I found that I really enjoyed this, and I began to just take it further and further. So being a young married man and with a child, I went back to college, and I realized that, hey, I think this is my calling, at least in the activities of a career. This is my calling, and so I continued to study and go further and further with my study, and ended up earning a bachelor of fine arts from Oklahoma State University, then a master of fine arts from OU, from the University of Oklahoma, and so really appreciate that.
So you're a cowboy and a Sooner.
I am. I get some ribbing there a little bit for that, but I had a good time at both institutions, and had some wonderful professors and mentors there, and I'm really thankful.
Well, tell me about this work. I mean, I love the positioning of the two figures here.
Yes, and so this is my grandfather and my grandfather and my great grandfather, and it would have been right after statehood in Oklahoma. And you can see them; they're decked out in their finery. And my grandfather loved to wear hats, and we have that in common. Actually, my grandfather and I have a lot in common. So we love to wear hats. I have an array of hats on my antlers there, and in my living room. And my dad loved to dress. So he was a pastor, and he loved to wear a suit and tie. And he kind of passed that on to me as well. He loved the old movies. My father did, and I think he got a little bit of that from my father and grandfathers. They kind of passed that idea of dressing well, and down to their children. And so this is my grandfather, and he attended Bacone Indian University, it was called there at the time, in Muskogee, Oklahoma. So it's an historic institution, as it's one of the oldest higher education institutions in Oklahoma, and it continues today. And I had the pleasure of teaching there and directing the art program for a time back in the early 2000s. But this is an image of these two individuals. And fire to the Muskogees and the Seminoles is very important. And so animistic worship is part of their belief, and believing that they're spirits and everything. And so fire is an important aspect of that. But so they came from fire is part of that meaning, that they chose Christianity and came from their traditional ways, and took up a new faith. And so I'm sure it was challenging at that time because of just the history of Christianity, and some of the churches, and what happened in different families and different institutions. But as we begin to think about this exhibition, Bob, Aaron, and myself, it's not always that's not always the same. That's not always the story. Faith is something more than even just a denomination. individuals make decisions on how they will utilize the power that they have. And it looks like the U.S. government utilized certain religions and religious groups to do their bidding in the assimilation of indigenous people, and so that was in our case. And so we had a different experience in that, as we had the opportunity as contemporary individuals or indigenous people to look at faith, Christian faith, from a new lens, and that lens is very personal. And so our experiences have been very pleasant and rewarding and transformational. And so that we have a greater understanding of what it means to be a follower of Christ. And so that's why this exhibition is such an important part of what we're saying as contemporary indigenous people. And so this is a powerful piece for me.
It's a very evocative series. I enjoy it very much. But turning to a different series, again, you know, the vibrancy of color, the geometric patterns that are evident here are all very intriguing. There's a message here, Tony, but I haven't found it yet.
Yeah, so if you look at the piece, it looks very abstract. It's just a montage of color. But if you look even closer, you'll see that the designs in the pieces are very much in order. But the application of color is what's creating the abstractness of the piece. And so on this, we have the titles turned around. So the one on the left is Big City, and the blue piece is Matriarchal Wisdom. And so the Big City piece was inspired by my first trip to New York. And so I had an opportunity to exhibit work in a group exhibition titled Art, No Reservations, Art from Indian Territory. And so it was at the Museum of Art and Design in New York in 2012. And so as I looked around the city, you know, I would see these, you know, wonderful colors, especially Times Square. You know, it was such filled with color and movement, and it was easy to kind of get starstruck, I guess, in some way. You know, going to the big city and just, you know, looking at what was going on. But I would look around the corners of buildings, and I would see the contrast of kind of dingy gray and steel and rusting steel and those types of things. And so you see little bits of gray, little bits of brown, you know, in the piece as well. And so I'm trying to keep a level head as I experience this for the first time. And so we were there for an exhibition. And so actually Mr. Martin, Bobby Martin, and a good friend of ours, Troy Jackson, also was showing in the exhibition. And we traveled together, and we were all native artists from the same area. So we just had a wonderful time in New York, and you know, got to see some of the museums and ate at some of the delicatessens and paid too much for sandwiches and that type of thing. But it was a wonderful experience, and so it was it was inspired for my first trip to New York, and I think also the colors are important because I think it's more of my personality. You know, I was always a very outgoing child and wanted to have fun and enjoy life, and actually my Sac Fox name is Enoshka, and it means to celebrate. And so I had the opportunity of choosing that name, and I just thought, you know, that kind of that kind of sounds like me. I like to celebrate, I like to have a good time, and I like to enjoy life. And the other piece, Matriarchal Wisdom, is kind of the same way. You see a lot more pattern, and if you look at it closely, everything's laid out in order. And but as you kind of just sit there and look at it for a little bit, you'll see that there is order in the piece. You know, designs are laid out. There's Seminole patchwork designs, and there's also a woodland design or a Sac Fox design, and it's actually a squash leaf that's inverted. And it's speaking about my grandmother and my mother, who who were very, just tremendous ladies, but very different ladies. And that's what I'm speaking about in this piece, is I'm thinking about both of those women. Both of them had some good knowledge and wisdom to share, but I think their personalities, they just did it in a very different way. And but I really enjoyed this piece, and but it also speaks about our the identity of who we are. And this series does that because you'll see woodland designs of the Sac Fox people, and then you'll see the Muskogee designs and Seminole patchwork superimposed on top of each other, and that's creating some dynamic of abstractness. And then as I color in the piece, I'm thinking about relationships. I might be thinking about a sunset. I might be thinking about kayaking across the river, or spending time in the forest. And so you'll see the color combinations kind of change a bit. But I really appreciate this series, and it leads into the next series.
So tell us about this piece, Brevity of Time.
Yeah, and so I'm an artist that I kind of get bored easily. And so I couldn't do the same thing over and over and over. I know I have colleagues and friends who paint the same thing or very similar things. And but I don't know, my attention span's not very long. So I really enjoy moving from series and creating new series. I think time is too short, and I'm definitely in the middle latter portion of my life. And but I found my voice, I think, with the art that I'm creating, is that I'm thinking about the life that we live. I'm thinking about the symbolic nature of creation, and so this series deals with the ideas of transformation. And so I'm looking at the butterflies. They travel in my backyard, and I'm looking at different ones. I'll take photographs, and I'll look them up. And this happens to be the pink lady. And I've seen this butterfly many times in my backyard on the flowers. But as I begin to really look at the process of metamorphosis, the same thing happens with believers. And so in the book of Romans, and I think chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, he talks about being transformed and being the renewing of the individual's mind, and giving yourself over to service. And so this is what this series is kind of really looking at, that we as individuals, as human beings, we are transforming, whether it's in a good way and in the way maybe that the Almighty has intended, as He has given the opportunity to know Him as God, as Lord and Savior, and so this transformation is occurring. And so this is 3 panels stacked on top of each other, and so the chrysalis actually has written Muskogee language on it, and it's and I believe this piece has the Lord's Prayer in Muskogee written on it. And then the black and white smaller paneled piece is what the caterpillar looks like when it's feeding on leaves and crawling across limbs and things. But the miraculous thing is that once it goes into the cocoon, something true happens in that cocoon, transformative. And that's what God says, that His children have an opportunity to take part in, the transformation. And so this transformation allows that caterpillar, who could only crawl and eat and was kind of ugly, to one day come out of that chrysalis and fly away, but very beautiful in its decoration. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking about as I create this series. And I have a few pieces that I'm working on now. And I work on many pieces at one time. I don't work on just one, finish it and do another one. I'm working on 10, 12, 15 pieces at one time, and then also continuing the curation process that I work in as well.
My goodness. Well, here again, I see those patterns, those interlocking patterns that you talked about repeatedly throughout, and again, another very distinct piece with very vibrant color.
Oh yes. And so this is the black swallowtail in the yellow variety, which is the state butterfly of Oklahoma. And so this is a lovely piece in the series, and I think it just came home from a traveling exhibition. The orange piece that we showed previously is at the Ringling Museum in Sarasota, Florida. I'm taking part in a contemporary Seminole exhibition at the Ringling, and but I'm really proud of this series. I enjoy making these. I have the opportunity to show a smaller version in the Atlanta airport. You know, the Atlanta airport shows a lot of artwork, and so I've been invited to show one of the works on paper and then one of these smaller versions of the Transformation series. And so I really enjoy making art, creating art, and also teaching and helping other young artists to on their journey of creativity. So Seminole Church, Muskogee preacher. So this is my grandfather. While he was in Florida, and he's either leading a hymn or else he's teaching, and probably speaking in the Muskogee language. And again, you see just the layers of men and women in community, and so this is what God has intended, for humanity, is to be for a male and a woman to come together and to create, to find companionship, and to create. And so I really appreciate the ideas of our Indigenous people. They understood this, and so they knew the importance of life, and so we carry that on, in our current tribal affiliations, and what's important to us as men and women, and the families that we care for. Again, so Hughes County is the county where our family's allotment is, in Oklahoma, and so Hughes County is where my grandfather, my great grandfather, who we saw in the previous image there with my grandfather, has an allotment of land, and we still own that allotment. And so I go down there and visit every now and then, but no one lives on it. It's kind of it's a good ways, away from where we live now. And I live, closer to Oklahoma City, and I have a little 5-acre spread, and I'm able to live here in relative quietness, next to my neighbors, and enjoy just the nature, and what goes on in my backyard. I see deer and wild turkeys and roadrunners cross my backyard. And but I'm thinking about these individuals all the time, about what they meant to me, and meant to our family, and meant to our faith. And so this is definitely a family photograph that means a lot to me.
Well, here's a photo of the exhibition itself. I know you haven't had an opportunity to visit, but for those interested, you'll come and see Tony's artwork and those of his colleagues. I think you mentioned this book in the show.
Yes, and so this is the Reclaiming Home exhibition there at the Ringling in Sarasota, and I had the pleasure of going down and installing some art. So I also create installation pieces, and so I went down and spent a week in Sarasota. I got to visit with some of the other Seminole artists, and so they chose 13 artists to take part in this exhibition, which is a historic exhibition. It's the first time any Indigenous people have ever shown in the Ringling, and the Ringling went up in 1920, and so 100 years. And so we were the first to take part, and so I want to thank the Ringling and Ola, the chief curator in that exhibition, for just reaching out to us and giving us the opportunity to show contemporary Seminole art. And so they've created a lovely catalog, and I heard it sold out once, and they had a reprint. So very interesting. But I think the population there in Florida is really accepting, and really just interested in what's going on in contemporary American Indian life.
Well, congratulations on the show. You've asked me to add a couple of additional slides. I see a handsome guy in the middle. Who are all the people around him?
So these are the 13 artists that took part, and the curators there at the Ringling, And so the final day, we were there for a week, and there were a couple of receptions, each night. And then this was the conclusion for the public opening. They had a nice public forum where we were able to speak about the exhibition, our work, our lives, and future plans. And so these are some of the artists that took part, and I was really just really honored to take part in this exhibition.
Some beautiful, serene views.
So this is so I've recently, in the last couple of years, have been going back to the ancestral land of my grandmother's people, the Sac Fox. And so they lived in northern Illinois, along the Rock River and where the Mississippi River converge. And so I'm up in the Rockford area, and it was the first time I've ever been in the area thinking about art. So we had an opportunity to go down to the river, and they call it the driftless water region because the Rock River flows kind of so slow, and this was in winter, and the only way we could really tell that it was a river and not a lake was that the ice was moving. And the water itself was just pristine and still, and I had to get a photograph of it. But my next body of work will be based on the theme of being Sac Fox or Sauk, as my family are, because the Sac Fox were two different tribes that were brought together, and the government put them together and created a treaty with them. But originally they were two different tribes, but with very similar language and culture. But so my next body of work will be based on my research as I go back up into the area, look at collections, look at objects and items that really just speak to me as a contemporary man. And I really just have a real high regard for these individuals and how they lived and lived off the land, and in shelters that they created, from the wood and from reeds from the water, and they would weave these together. They would create different things, bows and arrows, canoes, and so that really just fascinates me as an outdoorsman. And so my next body of work that I hope I'll get to show in Chicago after I finish it will be based on the Sac Fox people and their experience there along the Mississippi and Rock River in northern Illinois.
So is this an example of what you're researching?
This is an example of what I'm researching. So this is two Sac Fox ladies, and you can see a traditional house that's made out of reed that were woven very tightly together. And so this would be a winter house. And so they would weave these together in such a way they would be tight, and you can see how the direction of the reed is facing downward, and so the water and snow would run off, and inside everybody would be nice and warm. And then they're sitting on a platform, and I wanted to include this because this is one of my next installation pieces. If everything goes right, I'll be in Chicago this summer, and I will be recreating a piece similar to this. It's an installation piece that I have in mind for a space outside of the University of Chicago, and so I'm just thinking about these individuals and how they lived, and what they still mean to me and what they mean to our tribe, and I just really appreciate the creativity that they took when they found materials. And as they got trade goods, the materials and the designs, they became more vibrant, just like my paintings. The vibrancy of color was interesting to them, because if they had to create things from just raw materials, it was not easy. Taking bark from the bass tree, and it came off in these long strands, and they would prepare it, and they would dye it, and they would weave it into bags, and just everything else that they did, But whenever they came into able to trade for colorful goods and beads and things, their creativity just excelled in what they were producing, and I'm really just thankful for that heritage of creativity.
Well, Tony, you're not only a man of art, but you're a man of letters. You're doing a great deal of historical research, and you're also quite a man of faith. And the inspiration that you've received is showcased in the works that you've shared with us and with others. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to allow people in this region to enjoy it and learn from it.
Well, I thank you, and I'm pleased that the area, I hope, will go out and see the exhibition and think about their own faith and think about their own creativity. And so I'm very thankful, Peter, and thank everybody there who's working on the exhibition and as they keep it up this summer.
Well, thank you, Tony, for your candor and sharing your experiences. And God bless you. God bless your work, your family. I want to share with our audience that the next presentation of this sort is going to be on June 14th with Tony's collaborator, Aaron Shaw, whom you heard him mention. And there is a link to register in that session in the handout that I mentioned if you haven't downloaded it. And you'll also receive a follow-up email with a link so that you can register for the next session as well as share this recording with others. For those who are just joining us for the first time, haven't been familiar, our facility, as is noted here, is at 1 State Street in New Haven, Connecticut, and we are available for visitors on Wednesdays through Sundays from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. Admission and parking here right on site are free, so you are most welcome. And one last reminder, the show, The Altars of Reconciliation, runs through August 13th of 2023. So please plan to visit when you are in the area. Until next month, please stay connected with the McGivney Center. Our icons there for our social media channels and our website, michaelmcgivneycenter.org. God bless you. Thank you for your attention, and Vivat Jesus.